Crazy in Whoa. Whoa, major earthquake. All right, my well-pod art almost fell off the wall over there, but maybe we can get going with this video now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting Raid Shadow Legends video. What I want to do today in this video is talk about my absolute top favorite epic in every single faction. And since it's going to take a minute to do every faction, what I want to do is I'm going to put timestamps in this video. So if you want to jump to a certain faction, jump around, see my Shadowkin one, for instance, you can go ahead and jump to that. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. I appreciate your time, and let's get going with number one and the first faction. Now, I know what you're thinking. For Banner Lords, you're probably like, all right, this is an obvious Stag Knight, but that actually is, he's called the Sigiled, or Sigiled, however you want to say that. And it's not just because of this admittedly beautiful art when you look at that shield. I mean, they really did a good job, but this character's kit is also very thematic for the way it kind of looks like a stone gargoyle. Obviously, you look at the basic decreased attack. Works good in Clan Boss, right? So if you pull him, you got that. But then you have an AoE provoke with a 25% of his max HP shield on himself that goes down to a 3-turn cooldown when booked. I've actually had a lot of use for provoke lately, especially in Faction Wars and the Doom Tower, and this is a pretty good move. Now you pair that with his shield based upon his max HP, he's pretty tanky. Now here's where it gets kind of cooler. The third move, he gives increased defense and 50% attack buff on all allies. So you get kind of a cool combo of attack up with attack down, and then you get defense up as well. So he buffs both your attack-based and defense-based characters. And this is cool too, which is that it fills his turn meter by 15% whenever they're attacked by another enemy under provoke or increased attack buff. Meaning, so if you provoke, 5 people on the enemy team because you put accuracy on him, he gets hit 5 times. You can do the very basic math, 75% quick maths back, okay? And for that reason, it's much easier to keep the provoke up. Now, this is not the best aura. It's only defense in faction crypts. And as we all know, there's a bomb wave in faction crypts that is one of the hardest ones that, for instance, I've been struggling with lately. And the ally defense doesn't really do anything for that. But provoke does, because it can stop the bombs from happening. I'm actually fairly happy with this character being just an epic. It's not a legendary, so it's not going to be impossible to get. He's actually, if you look at the affinities, a Spirit affinity. And a lot of these defense down, attack down type of champions end up being magic affinity. But this is much like Stag Knight, you actually have a Spirit affinity. So we could tie this with Stag Knight and kind of say the same thing here and say, well, he does, decrease speed, he does AoE defense down and decreased attack, but Stag Knight doesn't really have in his kit the CC that this character actually does, that is called the Sigil. I'm just gonna call him Sigil, it has as well. And you compare the provoke AoE on top of the fact that you could put like a stun set on. So you could provoke people, and if the provoke doesn't land because it gets resisted, you still have a chance to land that stun. For instance, that's going on with the Drop Frenzy right now. So I'm a big fan of this character. All right, the High Elves doesn't really have a contest. It's pretty obviously Royal Guard. Royal Guard himself is completely nuts because he has something that basically no other character does, which is an AoE nuke that's based upon both attack and enemy max HP. The majority of it being off enemy max HP, meaning he's essentially a crucial character because he's one of only a few characters that actually has this. And he's an epic. The problem with Royal Guard is as more and more epics come out, and as more of those epics don't have these enemy max HP types of moves, it becomes harder to acquire. His basic attack itself has a 50% chance unbooked of putting a decreased defense, which is fantastic, especially when you pair that with his A2. And then he hits 4 times a random, which does decreased speed. Decreased speed actually being important for things like Fire Knight, for instance, okay? So you got some advantages right there. He also has a best in game for epic increase ally attack in dungeons by 35%. This is only really squeezed out by a few legendaries, and some legendaries actually have a worse ally attack in dungeons, for instance, Lead. So for this reason, actually a pretty big fan, and real fast here, we have a cameo by Paimon the Kitty, get out of my water. But yeah, Royal Guard is definitely top tier. He's got to be. I mean, this was an obvious one you probably did see coming for the High Elves. I wanted to do a quick mention here of Vergus. Vergus is amazing for the Doom Tower. The passive is hilarious. You can take a look at him on your own time, but it was very difficult for me not to pick Vergus for my absolute favorite epic, but Royal Guard is definitely the obvious choice. Now, Sacred Order is really something that we could sit here and debate for a long time. There's Inquisitor and there's Godseeker. Okay, these are pretty ridiculous. I kind of want to say I want to go with Godseeker, but here's the thing. I'm actually going to go with somebody different. You can look at Godseeker if you want, because she might actually be better, but I'm going to go with Cardno. And the reason I'm going with Cardno is maybe I'm a little biased because I did pull Cardno on the second season of the free-to-play, but in Raid Shadow Legends, Cardno tends to be one of the characters that is sort of unreplaceable for what she does. And let me describe what I mean. So if you actually look here at her A3, which is really what she's about, it revives literally all of your dead allies and heals them by 25% of their max HP. So they're not going to be full HP when they come up, but they do something called boost their turn meter to max. If you didn't know, boosting turn meter to max is actually a different mechanic than boosting it to 100%, because max is actually more than 100%, because your turn meter bar does fill to more than 100. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a person at 90% who's faster than a person who's at 95%, and the other guy is so much faster that the guy from 95 goes to 100, but the guy from 90 gains 20%. So he actually goes to 110% and goes before the other guy. It's kind of a rough way of how it works. For this reason, boosting turn meter to max is all the way filled, meaning if there's another person who has like 100%, for instance, max actually beats out 100%. So they're going to go beforehand. Now, the only difference is if the difference between, now this is how I believe it works, is if the difference between the 100% speed and the person who's boosted to max is actually significant enough that by the time it goes from Cardno to the max, the other person can fill it. Now, how that math actually works out, I don't know. Okay, but what I can tell you from practical experience, looking at Cardno, the majority of time when she revives a dead ally, the person that she revived goes before the other people that look like they had full turn meter. That's essentially the way it practically ends up working out every time I've used her. Now, that may mean my characters are faster, what have you, but that's been my experience, and it's the majority of the reason I pick her. Plus, on top of it, she has pretty decent base HP at 17,000. It's nothing to write home about, but it's enough that you could build her fairly tanky and just use her as a revive bot. Now, we could also talk about increased defense, heals the target ally, and she even has a 5% poison on a basic attack, but that's not really why we picked her now, is it? It's this weird mechanic of the A3. And if someone knows the actual math or has actually looked into the actual code of the game and can explain to me the difference between max and 100% instead of actually just using my practical experience from the way I've seen it work, I would love that information. But that is why I like her. And let me tell you, the Barbarians are hard to pick from, and it's not because they have a lot of good options. Okay, I mean, these guys are pathetic. Now, we could go with like Sky Touched, we could go with Vala. I think maybe the obvious choice isn't any of these. If you look at this character, stun, attacks all allies, defense down, steals turn meter from target under increased defense debuffs, decreases the turn meter of all enemies, 75% chance of placing a stun debuff on all enemies who have their turn meter fully depleted. Okay, so I actually think this character might potentially be more nuts than some of the other ones. And she doesn't really get a lot of love, I feel like, but I've learned in my experience, anyone, when you look at it, has multiple ways of decreasing turn meter and multiple forms of CC tends to be pretty good. A stun on basic that goes up to 45% chance is actually not bad. The fact that the passive gives her turn meter based upon stun obviously throws to the fact that you could throw a stun set on her. Kitty, please get out of my water. She constantly drinks from my cup. And I just gave her fresh water. Very frustrating. But on top of the cool tattoos and all that, or scars, whatever you want to call them, I do actually think her kit's fairly unique. Now, I can't say she's the best, okay? But she's probably the one that I like the most. Mostly because of the way that the decreasing turn meter plus the stun works in the turn meter set. You can put her on a stun set. Maybe I got stun set in the brain because there's a stun set drop frenzy going on right now. But it's really hard pickings out of this crew. We could go with the Fat as the obvious choice. We've all seen him in Unkillable comps, decreased defense, HP burn. We got poisons, crit rate, crit damage. The character does 1 billion damage, deflects 20% of all incoming damage to himself. Damage is spread across allies. We could go into all of that, sure, admittedly. And maybe if we were talking about Clan Boss, he would be the guy I'm talking about. But the fact of the matter is, a single target HP burn, poison, and attack, or excuse me, defense down, is only really viable on Clan Boss type of situation. And unless you're using debuff spread or something, there's not really too much of a place for this guy in other forms of PvE. At least not that I can see so far, and it's part of the reason I don't use him. I would much prefer Armina. So, without saying that, hey, let's pick between the two fat people, we're gonna go with fat person number 1. Speaking of fat people, we get into the Ogryn Tribes, and this is really not a contest. Maneater, there's nothing to discuss here. Maneater is a disgusting character, has AoE attack down on a basic attack, which is just nuts, okay? The A2 fully depletes the turn meter and steals it, essentially. Okay, so if the person had 50% turn meter, he gains 50% turn meter. Obviously, it ain't gonna work on Clan Boss, so don't even bother. Champion receives damage, then places Unkillable and block debuffs buff on all allies for 2 turns. Damage received is equal to 5% max HP for each living ally. Okay, so you gotta have 25% if you don't want to die. Now, looking at the Unkillable block debuffs, you can figure out why he's good. If you can't get debuffed and you can't die, and you have high enough resistance, what can actually happen to you? Nothing! So, for that reason, Maneater tends to be one of the most broken characters in the game, and is the only character in the game that, if you have 2 of them, it's pretty much what you run in Clan Boss and you automatically win the game. You put 2 of these guys together, wow, you're a genius. Okay, congratulations, you figured it out. That's basically how the character works. Now you go to the aura, ally HP in dungeons. Sure, who cares about HP when you can't die? The character is busted. Lizardmen have an unfortunate experience too with their epics. They're pretty much loaded on the legendaries, and the rares and epics kind of aren't so hot. So what we have here in the epics, it basically is a fight between Broadmaw, and the only reason I say Broadmaw is for faction wars, because it's revive 2 dead allies and you get block debuffs, which is one of the only ways to really revive in Lizardmen, if not the only way, if I remember correctly. And then looking into this, the real answer here is Jareg, which is, if you look at Jareg, he is effectively, how to put it, he's a relic of a dated time. So he's from when Clan Boss was essentially done properly. Like, no one cheesed it. We weren't seeing their spamming Unkillable. You know, it wasn't like the first Unkillable that I did back in the day with triple Pain Eater and, you know, 1 Maneater, triple Pain Eater Rashkar, or triple Pain Eater Santa or whatever. Like, it wasn't that cheesy, okay? Instead, this is like, we're actually going to build a real team. So what he has is a decreased attack on his basic. This is ally protection and increased defense on a 4-turn cooldown, so you can tune him to go with the AoEs. His passive gives continuous heal whenever an ally loses 20% of their max HP in 1 hit, meaning punches, the first slam, etc. from Clan Boss, stuff like that can trigger it. And then he has ally HP in all battles. This was effectively a mini Alton and was arguably better than Alton in certain situations, especially with the pairing of HP plus continuous heal. For that reason, Jareg, in my opinion, is still the best epic, because as you guys know, I've spent $16,000 on this game, and I still don't have 2 Maneaters. So I'm really put in the position of building a wacky Unkillable team with these Painkeeper, Warcaster kind of garbage, or I wait till I get double Maneater, or I just build, with the millions of characters I already have, a team that's a normal Clan Boss team. And Jareg would be one of these options, but because he does have the defensive tools to allow your team to sustain themselves while they do damage, and you can be speed tuned and all that. Jareg is an OG, meaning that he was one of sort of the original additions to the character. He wasn't the legacy characters, he didn't come out with the game, he got added afterwards. But when he was added into the game, there was a brief moment in the sun for him, and I think he still got a little bit of that time before the shade arrives. Okay, Skinwalkers, I'm gonna cheat for Skinwalkers because there is no best. And I say that because it's true. There's not a best epic. I really don't believe there is. And Kitty's like sneaking like this, like trying to get to my water, like she thinks if she moves slow I don't see her, like she's Drax or something. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do for Skinwalkers, okay? I want to show you 3 of them that I like, and I'm going to kind of do them a little bit quicker. And the first one's not the best remotely, but it's Rain Beast, and the entire reason is the passive. which is early on, this is pretty hilarious to use. I got him as one of my first epics in the entire game. In fact, I got 5 of him before I pulled my second legendary. It was hilarious. There's even a video of me running like a 5-man Rain Beast team somewhere on the channel, right? Probably one of my troll videos. But the passive is actually really cool, which is 35% before booked of champion's max HP, meaning his max HP, which occurs once per turn, will not place a shield buff on this character, okay? Meaning 35% is an 18,000 HP character. If you fully HP him, you can get like a 20,000 plus shield on somebody just who received hard damage. And the thing about it is, on bombs, this can actually save you. So like, if one bomb triggers and goes and does enough damage, it will then trigger the shield before the second bomb goes off, meaning this can actually help you in Faction Wars. I learned this one. Now, obviously better than that is characters like Thane, who are very good in Clan Boss on unkillable teams. Attacks an enemy 2 times, chance of stealing turn meter, 75% chance of placing poison, and decreased attack. You can figure that one out. Decreased defense and weaken. So what we have here, we have a character that essentially does everything you need for Clan Boss built into one character. We can put 2 and 2 together there, right? Okay, but then we also have Steel Skull, same type of deal, but is a little bit more variety usable. He has an AoE heal, which is also increased defense, okay, which is pretty good. Increased defense is always usable. It's a 4-turn cooldown though, a little bit of a bummer. It removes all buffs from target ally, then heals them for 40%, 3-turn cooldown. The cleanse can be nice, and the basic has a chance of placing a poison, but really needs to be booked if you want to be able to. Kitty is now knocking my water over onto me. Really needs to be booked if you want to get a decent chance, you know, of actually placing the poison. So you do need booked. The ally defense and faction crypts. Once again, defense and faction crypts isn't really that good for bomb waves, but the Skinwalkers does have a lot of good defense-based characters. And that's it. The epics really aren't very good, aren't very impressive. Really, all of them are kind of on the same wavelength for me. Best in Clan Boss, best everywhere else. Over here, and then she snuck around the long way around the piano to try to get me while my back was turned. You know, you little monster. You little monster. Arr! There she goes. Right back to the water. Luckily, the Orcs actually have a lot of good options, but I'm gonna bypass the obvious one, which is Seer. Okay, if you want to talk about Seer, go look for a video that actually is just about Seer herself. She's crazy and... Whoa. Whoa, whoa, major earthquake. Oh, wow, that was... Dude, in Alaska, you get nervous anytime an earthquake's going on. It's still kind of going a little bit. Okay. All right. My well-pod art almost fell off the wall over there, but maybe we can get going with this video now. So we're actually not going to talk about Seer. We're instead going to talk about Zargala, who in my opinion is, she's not slept on, but she's an epic worthy of use of a legendary. And I mean, she's worthy as much use. Not only is she kind of the face of the Raven and have some decent curves, she has a really good kit. 25% weaken on the basic. Crack Armor gets triggered if you kill someone on A2, which does a lot of damage, and the Crack Armor skill itself hits all enemies 3 times, and each one, when booked, has a 75% chance of doing decreased defense on all enemies, okay? For that reason, well, it's actually the second, or I should say the second. The third hits have a chance. The first one doesn't actually have a chance to do the decreased defense. So you really get 1 hit after they have decreased defense, 1 hit when they don't have it, and 1 hit of them applying it, if that makes sense on the move. But she does do significant damage, and she's absolutely the right affinity for Dragon 20, meaning if you pull her, you almost automatically go straight to Dragon 20. On top of it, when you've seen my free-to-play account, you've seen Zargala. She is, in fact, a farmer. She can farm 12-6, which if you didn't know, 12-6 Brutal gives more experience than 12-3. The only difference is you get slightly less silver because you're selling boots instead of shields. But she is a top-tier character. She also has ally accuracy in all battles, and that's not a useless aura, especially early game when every accuracy matters, especially trying to land debuffs when you are a decreased defense champion. For that reason, even Kitty agrees, although she is spooked from the, I guess not spooked enough, she's still, what, you just pulled something out of my drawer. Demonspawn has the unfortunate situation, or fortunate depending on how you look at it, of having a lot of really good epics. So my decision is hard, but I'm actually going to go with a lore, and the reason I'm going with a few oddball epics in this one is not just to be the hipster I look like, but on top of it, it's also because legitimately owning these different characters do something for your account that no other character in the game does. And of lore, of course, I'm speaking of, decreases target's turn meter by 75%. if you hit them with all three. Okay, now yes, it's random, decreases turn meter by 25% each critical hit, but one, you don't need to book it. Two, it's the basic attack, so you can do it over and over. Three, it works with champion charge. And four, if it's on a decreased turn meter boss with no adds, namely Fire Knight, you have an insane amount of turn meter control. Pair this with anyone else with a turn meter down, and she can effectively lock out a boss by herself, no problem. You don't even need another person to do decreased turn meter, just to speed up on her. Maybe a decreased speed on the other one. Stuff like that. There is a billion ways for me to talk into a lure being good. And we don't even need to talk about our other moves. You can look at them if you want. 30% decreased defense, whatever. Sleep debuff, whatever. Tax an enemy, inflict extra hit, maybe, ignores defense, whatever. None of those matter. Accuracy and crypts doesn't matter. The reason I think she's the best epic, and one of the best epics in the entire game, and is my personal favorite character for aesthetics, I mean, less is more with her. I do think that the fact that they added 75% decreased turn meter on a single target type of boss character, they're never going to do that again. It's not going to happen. I mean, let me put it this way. Just owning a lure automatically trivializes any content that can be turn meter locked out. It automatically trivializes it. It also makes it, I would say, in my personal opinion, really good since it's random. If it was just single target, it would actually be worse, because the fact that it is random paired with her A2 that's AoE means you can even put a stun set on her, get stun procs while decreasing turn. There's a lot of things you can do with this character. She's not slept on. People do mention her and do use her in streams and videos, but she doesn't get the place in the community I believe she deserves, which is like on the front line of discussions. She should be used in pretty much anything that requires a turn meter lockout for free-to-play friendly type of people. You can get her. She's been a legacy character. She's been in the game a long time. She might be sitting in your vault on use, and I guarantee you she will help you. Now, the Undead is overloaded with a lot of epics. Some of them are actually fairly high quality. It's a very difficult decision between 3 or 4 in my opinion, which is Seeker, Gorgorab, Mausoleum Mage, and potentially Annex. And I would go with Annex, but if we look at them with the decreased defense, decreased accuracy, poison, weaken, all that, this is more than likely a clan boss slash Doom Tower type of character. And I don't know if that's enough in such a competitive slot. I think I'm going to end up giving this one to Mausoleum Mage for the epics. And not just because I had to Foley book one on the free-to-play, but he gives so much utility that you can use him in multiple ways. He has decreased speed on the basic, which is useful. This here is the primary reason people use him in PvP, which is crit rate plus increased defense plus block debuffs on all allies for 1 turn, goes down to 3 turn when booked. And this right here is great in PvE, which removes all debuffs from all allies, then heals all allies by 10% of his HP, so once again you'd be able to make HP. Then heals each ally by 10% further if 1 or more debuffs are removed from that ally. Fills each turn meter by 15% if 2 or more debuffs are removed. So it is sort of like a mini Scartorsis type of move, but he gets the added benefit of this move with the defense and the increased crit rate and the block debuffs and the decreased speed, yada, yada, yada. Very useful in PvE, in dungeons, Doom Tower, and PvP because of the variety that he excels in, much like the other epic Seeker, where he's essentially, you know, he's a one-turn wonder at this type of guy. He excels in so many things that I think I'm going to end up giving it to Mausoleum Mage as my favorite epic. Right, so Dark Elves is really a no contest of Madame Ceres. It's a void, and I hate to pick a void on you, but it's not. I would be yelled at if I didn't pick her. I wanted to say Sylar because I could make a pretty good argument for Sylar, but Madame does clean her away pretty much. I mean, she's a whole nother tier above. And if you don't know why, it's pretty much all because of the A3, which removes all buffs from enemies, then does defense down and attack down. This is better than the Conjurer, for instance, that removes buffs and then does weaken down, because defense is better than the weaken, for instance. This is potentially like a top 5 move in the entire game. to give you an idea. It's very, very good. And we're not just talking PvE, we are talking PvP too. She's void, so if you have her with enough accuracy, that removing and flipping is just always going to land, unless it's a can't be removed type of buff. And that's really good. Now, on top of it, her passive's nice. She shields herself. If she gets attacked while she has a shield, chance of placing fear on the other person, can steal buffs, places block debuffs on allies if any buffs are stolen, places true fear debuff on all enemies who have buffs stolen. So we have a few other things there and a chance to do fear on the basic. But really, the A3, this flipping mechanic where it takes the buffs off and puts bad debuffs on, really, it's such a good move that we've got to give it to Madame and the Dark Elves. It's so obvious that I'm going to mention a couple other honorable mentions. It's Miscreated Monster for the Knight's Revenant. Miscreated Monster is completely busted. Ally protection on everyone, heals himself 50%, continuous heals himself, stuns the enemies with a chance, shields all allies for a portion of the damage inflicted, which is nuts on an AoE move, because like we've seen with Solus, you can have hundreds of thousands of HP worth of shield, especially in Spider. Automatically lets you do Spider, chance of placing a stun. If you get the stun, chance of placing decreased defense. I mean, what more can I say, except for the fact he also places fear. And that's not a chance. It just happens with no cooldown if somebody gets attacked that's under his protection buff, okay? What else? Oh my god, 33% HP in arena battles. So I used him in PvP on my free-to-play. I used him in PvE on my free-to-play. I've used him on my main. Top tier character, absolutely best in Knight's Revenant, no question. So we're going to go ahead and mention two others, which is Sentinel because of her passive, which is a chance of completely blocking incoming damage when an ally is attacked, which is nuts. She also has defense up, block debuffs, and a decreased attack, so she's great in Clan Boss. And then we're going to talk about Rector very shortly, which is the fact that she can revive, perfect veil a person, heal all allies, and then she's also got decreased attack on basic, so it's pretty good. Now, her passive heals people that are under the veil when they get a turn, sort of like a reverse Doom Priest passive, I suppose, where she heals people on her turn, she heals on other people's turn. Not bad. Ally resist actually happens in Doom Towers, and if you read here, increases the resistance of allies under the veil and perfect veil. So if you need resistance or you need Doom Tower, healing, yada yada, there you are. Knight's Revenant, best by far, is going to be Miscreated Monster. We could talk about Skull Crown, etc., but number one, Miscreated Monster. Okay, so the dwarves, much like basically everyone in here, are garbage. Unfortunately, I mean, not garbage. Grizzojaro is good. I'm just going to do it this way. Grizzojaro is good if it's like a support. Rearguard's good as a support. Rockbreaker's kind of okay as this weird character you can build for a meme. Gala's all right for the multiple turns. This new guy with this whole mechanic of like the Gleam of Avarice getting reset, and you look at the Gold Mat where he sacrifices HP, so what you need is the Gleam of Avarice to go, and he does the weekend. It's everything's weird. Like the problem with the dwarves is they're weird. They don't intuitively make it easy to use the character. The only ones that are that way are like the legendaries, but even like the legendaries, you have to build kind of weird. Like you have Molly, who's a tank, and you need enough accuracy for the provoke, but if you don't make her tanky enough, she's gonna die, so what's the point of having her with the revives? And then Tormund's, you know, Tormund's Tormund. Like when he came out, he was one of the most busted characters in the whole game, but it's like, you don't even really build him high accuracy on. I suppose you could for the freeze, but it's like, if you're even building him, you might be using it just for the stun set or taunt set procs, and the fact that he constantly, so there's some weird problems with the dwarfs, okay? And unfortunately, I kind of think the epics fall under that same weird problem, where you have these characters that almost do something. Like, look at it. Like, here's an example. Place a shield buff on all allies, 20% of her max HP, and then continuous heals all allies. That seems really good. You look at the other moves. Revives 2 random allies, 20% HP, 20% turn meter, shield buff on all allies, 30% of their health. Wow, that seems good too. Remove a random debuff from an ally. It's like, it's almost, you know what I mean? It's almost good enough. And they had to put this character in just to make the faction wars easier, because the only revive we really have is Molly. And I can't give you a top one, and if I had to, it would be Grizzojaro. Like, if you put a gun to my head, it's Grizzojaro, okay? And that's going to be almost entirely because he has block debuffs, increased defense on 3-turn cooldown, and decreased attack in AoE. That's it. That's not enough for me, personally. At least as the Shadowkin. Obviously, I have none of this. We have the Frog, we have Sashi, we have Finchi, and we have Crow. So which one do I actually find the most appealing out of these guys, okay? Oh, also we have this character. I actually don't think it's this character. I'm gonna show you why. Obrobo decreased, defense, will attack all enemies instead if there's a bunch of debuffs. Attack an enemy 2 times. Second is transferring all debuffs to the target. Chance of stealing all buffs from the target when attacking under Veil or Perfect Veil. Increase crit rate, increase damage, places Perfect Veil, and then the passive revive on death on itself whenever they receive Veil or Perfect Veil. You might think that's kind of cool, especially with the ally attacking all damage. From my experience, the Veil and Perfect Veil has never worked out with any character except like Candifron. Like, unless we're talking about Duchess, is in an offensive manner. Okay, you're not really seeing Veil used. Like, you don't see people Veil somebody to get the bonuses, like Roxanne to get the decrease in weaken. You just use Draco or whatever, which is such an elitist thing to say, because it's like, bro, if you have both of those, like, you know, come on, you're not the one that needs this video anyway. And I get it, but I'm saying the point is that Veil and Perfect Veil have never, in my opinion, been implemented in the game that offensively you need it. And if you're building an offensive character, why would you really want to build a character that has to do something first and need it in order to only do damage that's conditional? I don't like that at all. Whereas what we can do is we can look at someone like this character, Sashi, look at the basic attack here, which it just attacks all enemies. Okay, and yes, it's decreased accuracy, but it's an attack all enemies. Right off the bat, we know, pow, okay, stun set. No problem. Attacks an enemy, has a chance of placing decreased crit rate and decreased leech, okay? Then the A3, I think is kind of cool. Attack on all allies, then attacks an enemy. Fills the term meter of all allies by 20% if the attack is critical. So obviously you're going to build her with crit rate. It's a 3-turn cooldown. Her speed base is pretty good at 102. And if you look at the passive, revives in a random ally with 30% HP whenever this champion kills an enemy. 50% chance of placing fear debuff on all allies for 1 turn. All enemies for 1 turn whenever an ally is revived. So if you're reviving somebody, you get if you get feared, you also get